Now, in my opinion, I think protagonists are boring. They all kind of have like the same personality. They're courageous, they're selfless, like they don't care what other people think, but they're always willing to like be resilient and empathetic and whatever. They're boring, okay? Then they all go on the same hero's journey, the one you learned in elementary school, and they still keep doing that to this day. On the other hand, antagonists, the villains, get a lot more diversity, not only in their story arc, but also in their personality. So, in today's video essay, we're going to analyze the influence of one real life specific Roman villain on one of the most nuanced villains of the modern era. So, this leads me to my guiding question. How did our perception of Emperor Nero impact our understanding of Coriolanus Snow, aka the villain in the Hunger Games, as a character and as a villain? So I dedicated the majority of my project work time, like once I had this central question, to the act of researching. Okay, and I did a lot of research. I have 30 plus sources slash references and like things that I like went through and annotated and whatnot. So, but I only like have three main ancient sources because I was like able to draw so much from each ancient source. So I'll outline those now. First is Suetonius's The Life of Nero. This is 1/12 of the Life of 12 Caesars that he wrote, and this is like a very scandal-focused biography that emphasizes like Nero's personal like vices and like excesses and like moral corruption, just a hater overall. And it kind of helps us understand how Nero's public image were remembered and turned into like this cultural archetype that we see reflected in like Snow today. Then the second source is ancient Roman source is Tacitus's Annals. I don't know. Tacitus provides like a very detailed narrative of Nero's reign and like the major events, and I'll reference this the most actually out of all the sources. And it's very like good at providing this timeline of Nero's rule and like his motivations behind it. Then the third is like the third like Latin source is kind of the one I use the most sparingly. It's by Cassius Dio, Roman History, and it's just like a synthesized account that comes from a little bit later than the other two sources that just talks about like the consequences of his misrule and like his political decline in general. And this is like a way of checking back against like the validity of these earlier sources. So I use these three sources like a whole lot throughout my project, and hopefully I tried my best to add in like text bubbles or like whatever, like a text on the side of my screen saying like where my information is coming from. But I will have everything cited in the works cited. Then onto modern sources. I have a lot of these. So naturally, I use Suzanne Collins' novels. Okay, I used the 3 original Hunger Games book. I didn't use Sunrise on the Reaping. That's not really relevant for this purpose, but it's a great book. And obviously, I reread The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and I went through and I annotated the heck out of it. Took lots of notes, made like all the important quotes, whatever. And I also looked at a lot of articles and think pieces, which are cited. Obviously, like I'm not like stealing directly from there, just kind of like help me think through everything that I was writing in order to specifically understand Coriolanus' character and his development to a stronger capacity. And I do cite them all like in my references. And another thing that I did for this project was I read William Shakespeare's 1608 play Coriolanus, and I also annotated that, although to probably a much lesser extent than I annotated the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Okay, so that is kind of what I did, and then I will have my works cited hopefully like at the end of this video. So this is what you should expect. But know that like this video was actually originally, I'm filming the intro now, but this video, like the content part of it was originally like over an hour and a half long. So I had to like go back in and cut stuff of it because I would just like go on these like random tangents as I do and kind of as I am doing now. But the video is like kind of choppy at bits where I've like clearly taken stuff out, but I think I've done a good job like piecing it together. However, everything that I'm doing through this video, I chose a video essay format because I wanted to keep it casual. I wanted it to feel like not like a formal like writing down an essay or presenting to you guys in person. So I just thought let's keep it conversational, and you kind of see this like when I'm filming, I kind of tend to go off script. I just like have I'll be looking at like my computer with my list of bullet points in front of me and just kind of going off of that and like looking at the evidence that we have and then inserting my own opinion into a lot of it, because I think that is the most like intriguing part of this. And we'll see that even like our Latin sources tend to kind of insert their own opinion into things. So I'm in good company there. Now, without further ado, I guess let's get into it. Thank you so much. On page 89 of The Life of Nero, 1/12 of The Life of 12 Caesars, translated by Bill Thayer in 1914, Suetonius traces down the traits of Nero's forefathers along with Nero's own traits and derives at this conclusion. It seems to me worthwhile to give an account of several members of this family, to show more clearly that though Nero degenerated from the good qualities of his ancestors, he yet reproduced the vices of each of them, as if transmitted to him by natural inheritance. So it's actually this quote that kind of got me started on this whole rabbit hole. It's not a very flattering description at all. So let's dive into why that is and do a little historical context on Nero. Nero was born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, and through his mother, Agrippina the Younger, he was a direct descendant of Augustus. Agrippina recognized the political value of this, really, really old ancient lineage, and these ancient writers who were writing about this, portray her as very, very ambitious, something that wasn't really common or expected for women at the time. So Tacitus actually famously describes her as insatiable for power, and her goal was to position her son to succeed the Emperor Claudius, a goal that she definitely succeeded at. And in 49 CE, Agrippina married Emperor Claudius, her uncle, by the way. And there was significant political pressure, but eventually the whole thing got it went through. And Suetonius writes that Agrippina used every art of seduction to secure her influence over Claudius, which is really gross, so I'm going to try not to think about it. Anyway, following the marriage, Claudius actually adopted Nero, making him heir ahead of Claudius's actual son, his biological son, named Britannicus, not to be confused with Britannica. So this adoption, along with Nero's ancestry dating back to Augustus, puts him in a very, very unique position to take power. And we also saw this through Agrippina's very tight control over Nero's public image. The philosopher Seneca was actually his tutor, which was a very eloquent, respected guy by the Senate and by the people of Rome, which kind of rubbed off on Nero, hopefully, right? And the turning point, I guess, with in Nero's political journey is in 54 CE with the death of Claudius. And we don't really know why Claudius died. Tacitus actually says that Agrippina arranged for Claudius to be poisoned with a dish of mushrooms, but it's not confirmed. And Suetonius said that she's also engineered the emperor's death. So that's two pretty good sources talking about it was probably Agrippina doing it to try and get her son in power, so she didn't also have to be married to her uncle. Anyway, but the very, very suddenness of Claudius's death definitely served Nero and Agrippina's aims. And right after Claudius's death, the Praetorian Guard said that Nero, you are emperor. By the way, this guy is only 16. He would literally be in my grade, when he was getting declared emperor. But Cassius Dio describes how he was escorted before the soldiers and saluted as imperator. So he held the title, but actually what was happening behind the scenes was that the power was actually with the Praetorian prefect Burrus, Agrippina, and Seneca. Obviously, because Nero is 16 years old at the time, has no actual realization of what's going on, but he is not the one pulling the strings. Okay, in these first few years when he's not actually doing anything with his power are actually pretty good. They're pretty stable, okay? And under the guidance of Seneca and Burrus, the administrative decisions, everything is going pretty smooth. It's referred to as the quinquennium, and contemporaries tend to see them pretty well. The economy was doing well, everything was good, trade was fine. But as Nero grew older, he had a teenage rebellious phase, right? As we all do. Except we're usually not emperors when we do it. So anyway, so Britannicus, who was if you don't remember, the Britannica guy, who is the biological son of Claudius, still alive, by the way. Imagine your dad passes you up in favor of your, what is that, his cousin? I guess, but his cousin by marriage. I don't really know. Okay, but anyway, Britannicus is alive. He's reaching adulthood, and many people in Rome think, oh, he's probably the legitimate heir. And Nero's oh no, what do I do? Everyone thinks that Britannicus, who is the legitimate heir probably, is the legitimate heir. So Tacitus claims in his writings that Nero decided to poison him, and witnesses thought that he was having this epileptic fit because apparently Britannicus, similar to Caesar, right, had epilepsy. And whether or not this is true, it was by killing off Britannicus, Nero was an uncontested emperor. There was no one who could challenge him. And Nero's rebellious phase kind of continues, and he tries to kill his wife. So Nero is right at the time is having an affair with Poppaea Sabina. Okay, she's really important, really important. Just remember Poppaea Sabina. Anyway, and it's this relationship. He's oh my god, I love you, but my mom doesn't want you to be together. Classic stuff. And ancient historians describe that Nero tries to murder her 4 times. Okay, it's actually ridiculous. This is embarrassing. I would retire. He tried to poison her. He tried to but Agrippina's bro, you can't poison me. I have all these antidotes. You two can play at this game, my friend. And he even built this collapsing boat to try and drown her, which didn't work. She just swam away. So yeah, it didn't work. He tried to kill his mom so many times. So Nero's like, oh, screw it, like I'm just gonna like go kill her like directly. So he sent soldiers to kill her in her villa, and then she actually did die. So it took a while, but you know, third time's a charm, fourth time, I don't know, it's undisputed. Anyway, so after her death, everyone was like, bro, did you just like kill your mom? And the Senate, who's like, actually, like, this is kind of good, you're eliminating this like dangerous influence. And that means that like, okay, so no one is checking back against this guy. The Senate is like, he's got the Senate in his pocket somehow, because they're kind of like afraid of him, right? Anyway, this is where things start to get crazy. Let's talk about Nero's romantic situation, and this is like a lot to unpack. Now this, I want to warn you ahead of time, is not like something I'm going to be exploring too in depth in my analysis, because it kind of gets kind of crazy, but I think it's important for understanding Nero's character and like what made him the guy that he is. So let's go first on his first wife, Octavia. So his first wife is the daughter of Claudius. Okay, the intermarriage is like kind of starting to freak me out, so I'm just gonna like not acknowledge it, and you're just gonna go with it, okay? Anyway, she was really popular. Everyone's like, yes, Claudia Octavia, we love her. And then he divorced her. So he exiled her and like executed her on charges of adultery, which is like not true, by the way. Like a lot of times in like ancient Rome, they would just be like, yeah, she cheated, so like get her out of here. Like that's just like a way of like saying, oh yeah, bad woman, like you're not doing what women should or whatever. Anyway, so Nero actually divorced her in order to marry Poppaea Sabina, the girl I mentioned earlier. And the public is like really, really upset. And like Tacitus even like has like a whole passage about this. Maybe I'll put it on the screen or something. I probably won't. Okay, Poppaea Sabina, most important. So this is like Nero's second wife, okay? She had so much influence over Nero. This guy is down bad for her, okay? But, not, I guess, down bad enough that he actually cared about, like, her being alive or anything. Because both Suetonius and Cassius Dio, like, two of the most, like, responsible, best well-kept accounts, say that Nero actually killed her in, like, a fit of rage while she was pregnant, okay? He literally, like, supposedly, kicked her to death, like, in her pregnant stomach. Anyway, so this like death of Poppaea kind of shapes like he goes crazy, okay? And we'll talk about that later when we talk about Coriolanus and Lucy Gray. But now we also need to talk, this is technically in 65 CE-ish. Again, dates are kind of muddled. I looked through like a bunch of sources and like the dates kind of get confusing at times. So we're just gonna roll with it, okay? But the other thing that we have to address after he like kicks his pregnant wife, he was like really obsessed with, by the way. Like no one wanted him to marry Poppaea, and he's like, no, I'm gonna marry Poppaea. And then he's also gonna kill Poppaea and his like unborn child with Poppaea. But let's move to the Great Fire of Rome. Ali drew this picture of fire. It's not very good, but you know. Sorry, Ali. I love your fire. Anyway, the Great Fire of Rome. That's July 64 AD. We do have actual dates on this. And this massive fire tore through Rome, and it destroyed 10 out of 14 districts. That's a lot, okay? That's a lot of land just completely burned, gone. And Suetonius claims that Nero watched the city burn, okay? He not only watched, he was like standing above it, watching it burn. He was singing about it. He was singing specifically about the fall of Troy. I'm not gonna link that, like learn your classics, man. And he was playing the lyre, okay? So this guy is like seeing this all as like this big, beautiful performance. Like, look, the city, my city, as I am emperor, right? Or I being Nero, is emperor, and he's like, oh yeah, this is like so beautiful, and like look what I've done. And writers are actually suggesting that Nero actually just wanted to like build, like to clear out land in Rome for his palace, the Domus Aurea. So yeah, not a good look, right? Now, the other guy who writes like a lot on this, Tacitus, is actually saying that like, oh, well, technically Nero wasn't in Rome when like the fire started, and he actually returned immediately like from where he was to organize relief, and open the imperial gardens to refugees from the fires, and coordinate food supplies. But what both people do agree on is that he actually like blamed the Christians. So he said, no, it wasn't me. It was those like Christians. And the Christians are like a new religious sect at the time, which is kind of crazy to think about now that like Christianity is the most popular religion in the world. But like, yeah, okay, this is like the first state-sponsored persecution specifically of a religious group in Rome, okay? And it's not about like whether or not Nero caused the fire, okay? That's not important for our purposes. Now, essentially all people know is that like, okay, Nero caused this fire and then he blamed the Christians. That is the most important narrative, and we see this like echoing throughout history, whether or not it's actually true, because that's like the narrative, and we are studying today the narrative, not actually the history. Okay, before we do that, we need to talk about like the most morally like reprehensible thing that Nero ever did. And yes, it gets worse. It gets like a lot worse. It was actually like so bad researching this. Anyway, so after Poppaea dies, remember, after he kills her, Nero becomes romantically, sexually involved with a child slave named Sporus, okay? Sporus, by the way, okay, wait, I'll say that later. Actually, like, looked a little bit like Popeye, okay? They had a little facial similarity, whatever, like, there's not that many faces in the world. Like, instead of being like, like, what a weird coincidence, it's like child slave I just hired to, like, empty out piss pots, looks kind of like my late wife who I brutally murdered. Instead of doing like that, or, like, not even thinking about it, or just being like, Nero decides to have Sporus, who is a child, who was like 12, 13 years old at the time, okay, a middle schooler, I guess not a middle schooler then, but you know what I mean, okay, castrated, which, yeah, look it up, informally married to him in a public ceremony without consent, literally treating him as a replacement for his lost wife. He made him like wear her clothes and like perform her mannerisms and like speak in like a higher pitched voice so he could like sound like her and like recall like her memories in public. So Sporus, this like guy who doesn't have her memories, had to like pretend to like know what he was talking about, and he would like parade her, him, her, Sporus, whatever. He would parade Sporus as Papaya around in public, and the Roman court is like, what is he doing? But also, no, everyone is so scared to stand up to him. And, like, everyone's talking poorly about him behind his back, but no one is saying anything, okay? And, like, obviously reasons, I'm not going to be including this element of, like, Nero's story in the analysis in this video. But if you are really interested in learning more, you're, like, a really sick freak, and I will send you the link to a great 2-hour-long video that I watched about this. It's really, really messed up. Yeah, it's interesting. Also, another thing to note is that, like, we call him Sporus, but Sporus actually just means seed, like, Nero's seed. So, like, we don't actually know his name. It's really sad that, like, we don't know who this guy was. Anyway. Okay, summary. Lots of murder, lots of, like, incest, lots of, like, really gross stuff. Anyway, it's important to understand that a lot of this information is maybe not exactly true. Actually, a lot of this information is just straight up, like, people were just making it up, okay? Most of the surviving written accounts I'm citing not only, like, come from after the fact, like, Suetonius came, like, 50 to 100 years after the fact that, like, Nero died. So, like, they are, like, that is, like, if I were to write, like, a paper about the 1960s, like, okay, I could lie. I mean, maybe, like, you know, there's people alive who could, like, fact check me, but that's not important. Like, I can make up stuff, and if this is the only written account, like, we kind of have to go off of it, right? And we're specifically going off these specific accounts of Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio. I mean, I'll reference, like, a few more, but those are, like, the main writers. And these writers just hate the guy, okay? They hate him. It's pretty clear. Like, they just take every opportunity to dog on him. I mean, I would too, based on, like, what we learned. And they were also, like, actively trying to discredit him, to give power to the rulers that followed him. So, like, they had, like, some other side issues. He also like blamed the Christians for the fire that he allegedly started. And like once Christianity went from like an esoteric like niche religion sect to like what it is today, Nero's representation and like reputation in media has obviously suffered because like he literally blamed like what is now the biggest religious group for a really awful tragedy. Anyway, but in my opinion, and in the opinion of the video's analysis, the truth isn't actually important. Like, Nero's life, or rather Nero's story, is not like supposed to be taken at face value. It's a representation of the dangers of absolute power in the hands of a young ruler with a few limits. And this is where we get into Coriolanus Snow. I've got a slide for this. Come on. Yes, Nero and Snow. This is what I'm here to talk about, people. Okay. Actually, I lied. We actually first need to get a little background about the world of Panem. So if you never read The Hunger Games, it's too bad I'm not going to summarize it for you. And also, like, sorry for the spoilers. But here we go. This video isn't for you then. Okay, The Hunger Games. You've read it. Excellent novel series. And it's important to understand that Suzanne Collins was specifically, like, influenced by ancient Rome, like, the idea, the concept, everything about it, in general, when she was writing The Hunger Games. Okay, there's, like, countless claims. There's lots of things about it. I'm specifically going to go over, like, what's important for our purposes, okay? First, Panem. That's, like, the name of the place. You know that. Panem literally means bread, okay? And it comes from the phrase, if you give people bread in circuses, they will never revolt, okay? So, like, the idea that you can entertain people and you can feed them and they're not going to notice what you're doing to them is, like, kind of messed up. And we see this, like, happen so much. Like, we see this even happening, like, now in other countries and, like, I don't know, just, like, a great idea. We'll look at it. We'll see, like, all the stuff, man. Okay, the capital world in general, specifically the capital, like beyond the districts. If you think of the districts as like Rome's like Britannia and like all these other things that aren't like directly interconnected with like the city of Rome, that's what the capital kind of is. Okay, there's even like a guy named Nero Price in the Hunger Games things. Yeah, I think he's in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't think he has any plot relevancy, but like still, you know, there's a Nero, there's like a Seneca Crane. Yeah, the guy with like the the cool sideburns. Anyway, so there's lots of like Roman inspired names, and it's very clear that there's a lot of influence being drawn. And also like the idea of the Hunger Games is very similar to the Colosseum in Rome, right? And both of them are sharing this like same theme of like death and violence as an entertainment form. And one of my favorite things to talk about ever, but you know what I mean. Okay. Okay. Coriolanus the general. Okay. Coriolanus' name, like Coriolanus, kind of fancy name, they end up calling him Corio for like most of the thing. But Coriolanus' name is a direct reference to Gnaeus Marcius Coriolanus, aka a legendary Roman general from the 5th century BCE. Okay, so we're gonna look at, is it in the frame? Yes, great. Roman general, Coriolanus Snow, same name, different guy, actually pretty similar guy. Okay, and Gnaeus Marcius Coriolanus' life was actually like adapted into a Shakespeare play, which I decided to read for the purposes of like making this video, and also just because I thought it would be interesting. Oh my god, guys, it's so good. Like, it's very underrated in Shakespeare's whole catalog. Anyway, so the original Roman general Coriolanus, important to understand, was a patrician, aka like an aristocrat. He had money, and he actually like really hated the plebeians, the poor people, and I love to call people plebeians. Anyway, he was eventually exiled from Rome, and then he allied with Rome's enemies and marched against his home city, and only sparing it when his mother intervened. Now, let's look at Coriolanus' story in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, aka the prequel to The Hunger Games, great book, to mirror the similar like major plot points and the character arcs of between like Shakespeare's play Coriolanus and Suzanne Collins' book, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Okay, these guys have a lot of similarity. It's actually crazy. Like, if you read the Shakespeare play, you will notice everything is like the same. It's like how The Lion King and Hamlet are like really similar. Yeah, anyway, those who know. So the central theme in both is that, first of all, the protagonists really don't like people who are like poor, okay? They don't like the plebeians. They do not frick with the plebeians. And they prefer to think of themselves as like above everyone else. And in the play, Coriolanus is like this elite war hero. He can't bring himself to flatter the people for their votes. He's too like above them. And similarly in the book, Coriolanus Snow refers to the district citizens like very derogatory. And he believes that control has to stay in the like hands of the capital elite, okay? And we literally see him do this like throughout. He never changes this, despite like how poor he gets. He never changes his opinion that like, yes, the capital elite needs to stay in power. He only looks up because he wants to be at the top, not because he wants to blame the people at the top for like how bad his life is. Anyway, both characters have a very strong maternal figure who shapes their destiny and like their path in general, right? And her name is Voluminia. Whatever, I can't spell it. I'll put it on the screen. Okay, anyway, in the play, Voluminia is Coriolanus' mom, and she is the one who like encourages him to go down this like big strong guy military path and eventually pushes him into politics. And similarly in the book, it's Dr. Volumina Gall. I don't know where the Gaul came from, but same first name, guys. Same first name, strong maternal figure of the protagonist. And Dr. Volumina Gall is terrifying. She's the head game maker. She like has all these creepy snakes. I'll put a thing on the screen. And she acts as like the mentor figure for Coriolanus and shapes him into a ruthless, controlled, obsessed, like crazy individual, which is an instrumental part in his like transformation into the tyrannical President Snow that we know and hate. Okay, so we see that they kind of have like a very similar rise to power. They both like hate the poor. They both are shaped by this strong maternal figure, okay? And yeah, so mommy issues, hate the poor. Classic. Anyway, so when the Roman general Coriolanus is banished for his inability to compromise with the common people, he aligns with his former enemies, aka the Volscians. And Snow, on the other hand, isn't really banished. He's exiled to District 12 as a peacekeeper after he like does bad stuff as a mentor, or bad stuff, I don't know. Like bad stuff, and then I guess according to the capital. And he's like exiled to District 12, and there he kind of aligns with the enemy the same way that the other Coriolanus aligns with the enemy by like having a relationship with Lucy Gray and like having these like experiences in the districts. Obviously, they both eventually have their own separate betrayals and downfalls. I'm not going to spoil the play because I think you should read it. And I know it's like been out for like hundreds of years now, so I could spoil it. But, you know, I'm not going to. You should read it. Anyway, the play's theme and, like, its general arc as a framework explore the nature of the nurture debate. The idea that, like, are we born this way, or are, like, the people that we, who crave power around us shape us into the people that we are? And, like, the ideas that we are brought into within the capital of wherever, or the capital or ancient Rome, wherever, lead us down these paths of tyranny. And Snow embodying this classic tragic hero whose, like, pride and ambition lead to his moral corruption and obviously his long-term demise and, like, his fall. Okay. I'm gonna go get some water. Be right back for the next section. Okay, finally, the moment you've been waiting for. First, we unpacked Nero's rise. Then we talked about Coriolanus Snow. We also talked about Gnaeus Marcius Coriolanus. Then we talked about like this random side tangent that I had. Okay, so what is the difference and what is the similarities between Nero and Snow? Okay, here's the clean answer. They both see themselves as artists. Okay, so let's go on Nero's side. First, Nero's self-perception as an artist famously defined his reign over Rome, okay? This is like all everyone talks about in what he's, in every source that I've got. Okay, he saw himself primarily as a musician, like a poet and an actor, and he subjected all of ancient Rome to like all of his like crazy things that he had going on. Okay, and we see this in 3 key ways. First, he put on like a lot of public performance. He would just like perform for Rome. Okay, and he forced like the elite of Rome to attend these like long recitals where he would just like sing and like perform his poetry, and like everyone's like, bro, don't you have like a job as in like being the emperor of Rome right now? Anyway, in the second story like that represents him being like an artist is the story of him fiddling while Rome burned. We went over that later. And speaks to his obsession with having this like perception of art over duty. Okay, he said to have watched the fire from a tower, and he composed like this epic poem, whatever. He played this music, whatever it is. He saw himself as an artist. He was looking over at a canvas. He wasn't watching people suffer. He cared more about like his art, okay? And regardless of whether or not this is true, it's the idea that he cared more about his art than his duty. His art than like over the law. And this is the key idea that defines both of them. And his purported last words, allegedly, are "what an artist dies in me," summarizing a life where his artistic passion was perhaps his greatest self-delusion and a reflection of his like huge narcissism. To Nero, his life was a tragedy and the grand production, and he was the leading man. He was the star of his own show as emperor. Now, moving on to Snow, okay? Snow is also like an artist. He's an artist, but in a different way. He's kind of more like an architect, okay? He's like this architect of this perfect society. He thinks that everything is like perfect, and his tyranny isn't something that invades his art, unlike Nero. He's not like performing lengthy recitals for the elite. His tyranny is his art, okay? And like, first of all, in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, like Dr. Gall and like Snow himself view the Hunger Games as a necessity. There's something that's like an aesthetically compelling spectacle of power and control. This is something that they need to perform for everyone, okay? They say that like their manipulation, the way that they manipulate the rules and specifically the arena, because remember like prior to Gall and prior to like Snow getting involved, they would just like throw the kids in like a dirty pit and make them fight. There was no like aesthetic to it all. There was no like meticulous planning and like way of like controlling the narrative. And like when we get around to Katniss, we see that like every Hunger Games has like a story and it's like this beautiful art piece, and that is like the work of Snow, okay? He manipulates like the rules, the arena, and the narrative to allow them to see himself as like this creative force. He's the one shaping human behavior, okay? And secondly, we see this through the symbolism of the white rose. Okay, now throughout like all the movies and the books, Snow wears these like signature white roses. They've got this scent. It like kind of ties to like whatever his backstory of like growing them on the roof or whatever. But that's not important. It's not about his past. It's about who he is. It's a curated artistic statement that he's trying to present. It's showing like I have class, but also like in a dignified, like refined way. Also relating back to this idea of like whiteness as purity and like this idea that like red roses are too violent, right? Because they like have that like red bloodiness, I guess, to them. And they represent this like elegance that he has over his control. And he kind of forces this image onto Panem, okay? This is showing not only like his meticulous attention to detail, but the way that he crafts this public persona. Okay, we don't really see this from Nero after like Agrippina is killed by him. Nero doesn't really care about his public persona. We see this through the fact that like every like account of him is just like trash talking him, okay? But like Nero differs from Snow in the way that Snow like cares so much. And maybe it's because like Nero dies a lot earlier than Snow does, but Snow is able to like grow into this like crazier and crazier person. And we watch this happen firsthand, but I'll get to that later. Then like Snow believes in the philosophical design of Panem, okay? He thinks that like the capital is the head of this body, okay? This beautiful artistic head with all these like great visions going on. And the districts are the subservient body. They don't know what's happening. They're just like a hand ready to swing, okay? He sees the way that like he is maintaining the system, specifically like the ruthless way that he's doing it, is this essential act. He has to do it. Like he has to like keep this system in place because that's how he creatively brings order to this chaos. And there's this theme throughout throughout this Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes of chaos and human nature and like all these complex ideas. And we even see like Snow wrestle with his own internal challenges throughout that. But it's all about like how he wants to maintain this chaos, but maintain it under like this guise of perfection. And we see all this like crazy stuff happening underneath, but it's all under this like perfect white rose, right? We don't know about like for example, like the Avoxes, the people who like the slaves whose like tongues are cut off. Bro, that is just like casually dropped in there. And I think that is one of the most like pivotal parts of the Hunger Games, is when the Avoxes are just like kind of in the background as a representation of how like anyone who speaks out is going to be punished like severely. But it's all shown like under this like perfect, elegant light, and no one would ever know because they're not going to hear anything from them. Okay, so both figures like have their self-perception as artists, okay? Now, although this comes out in different ways, it's still the same thing, because it's a justification for their tyranny, and it contributes to the sense of being above everyone else, okay? As artists, they believe that they're above the conventional morality and governance. Their creative genius like allows them, that makes them think that they have the right to orchestrate lives and death. Death and like lives are just like pawns. They are the ones moving the chessboard. They aren't seeing like the pawn get killed in the back of like wherever, okay? Their creative genius gives them the ability to orchestrate the lives and deaths of other people in order to like sacrifice this grand vision. And you know what was really interesting? As I was like doing this research into like artists feeling like they're above the law, I got a lot of articles about like fashion and like how like the Anna Wintours of the world like believe that their creative genius allows them to treat everyone trash. Now, I'm not comparing like Anna Wintour to Nero or like Coriolanus Snow or anything, but I'm explaining this idea of how people who are like creative geniuses are be able to see above all of that, and they're able to see above the pain and suffering because to contribute to this like broader vision. Do you see my vision when I'm saying that? Okay, because both of them are viewing the world as a stage. The population of Panem, the population of Rome is just an audience. They're players in the production. Nero takes this very literally. He makes everyone watch his like performances, which apparently weren't very good, but maybe that's just like bias coming out. And Snow makes them do the exact same thing. He presents this curated world and says, look, this is true, believe it. Okay, and finally, their artistic self-obsession masks their profound like loss and lack of empathy. The suffering of their people is like secondary. This is like not even secondary. I wrote down secondary on the string. It's not even secondary. It's like a side constraint to like this beauty or order of their artwork. Whether that artwork is like an epic poem or a perfectly controlled tyrannical regime. Okay, so this is how I see it. You know when you embroider something, have you ever embroidered something? Anyway, in the back of the embroidery, I wish I had a piece of embroidery to show you right now. I'll pop it on the screen. Okay, and you, like the back of the embroidery is a complete mess. There's strands everywhere, like looks horrible. There's like gnarly knots and like all the colors are all messed up and it looks horrible and you just hate it. And then you flip the embroidery over and you've got this beautiful, beautiful picture on the other side. Okay, imagine Nero or Snow is the one embroidering. They are looking at the front side. They are in control of the entire narrative. They are the ones putting the string through as like emperor, as president. They are the ones controlling everything. They are the ones putting the needle through the string, whatever. They think that their front side looks really good. It's this beautiful artistic vision. But everyone else in Rome/Panem can't see the front side. They live their entire lives getting tangled up in the back side of the thread. Because in real life, the front side of the thread doesn't exist. Unless like, I don't know. I guess I'll tell you guys like in the afterlife. Whatever. As far as we know, like, this front side of the thread doesn't exist, but Nero and Snow think it does. They are seeing the front side of the thread. They've deluded themselves with this idea of art that they can like control everyone and like let people die if it contributes to this like vision that they have. So Nero, in conclusion of this like general statement, Nero and Coriolanus both agree. The world is a stage. It's a production. But Nero thinks himself the leading man and Coriolanus thinks himself the director. And I think there's a fundamental difference, which leads me into the key differences between them. Next slide. But wait, I almost forgot the most crucial similarity. Both Coriolanus Snow and Nero enact pivotal killings, or at least try to, in ways that emphasize their emotional detachment. Okay? Hear me out. In the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Snow attempts to kill Lucy Gray. Okay? He fires his gun up and blindly into the woods. Okay? And he's choosing a method that's like very like far away. He's not gonna look Lucy Gray in the eyes when he kills her. He's just gonna shoot and like hope he hits her. Okay? That's like not only physical distance, but also like emotional distance. He doesn't want to be connected to the kill. Okay? He doesn't want to confirm her death. He doesn't want to do any of that stuff. He doesn't want to have like this intimacy of like a brutal face-to-face murder, okay? And this is kind of similar to like what we were talking about earlier when I said that Nero like infamously tried to murder his mother Agrippina through like this collapsing boat scheme, which didn't really work because like Agrippina knows how to swim. But the idea that like he enacted this scheme, and even when he did kill her, like he didn't go like fist to fist and kill her, or like kick her in the like stomach or whatever like he did with his wife. He instead like tried to do it without him actually having to physically strike the blow, okay? And ancient sources say that like he sought a method to keep his hands clean. He didn't want to like actually like brutally kill his mom the same way that Snow doesn't want to brutally kill Lucy Gray, because they both like love these women, obviously in different ways, but they're both hiding behind this like idea of like an accident, or like when they both know that it was on purpose, okay? So both cases reveal a very, very similar pattern. However, one thing that is really important to say is that like we know for a fact that Nero succeeded in killing his mother eventually. It just took a few tries, but also we know that like we don't really know what happens to Lucy Gray. It's kind of a mystery, which is where this like conspiracy theory that I have comes in, which is that like, and this is like confirmed, you can check it out, or it's not confirmed, but like there's plenty of people who agree with me, so I'm not crazy, but I think that like Snow killed Lucy Gray. I think that like he did kill her, he found the body and he buried it. Like when like in the book it's talking about him burying the guns, he actually like buried her body, and like Snow is just like a really unreliable narrator and he's in denial about the whole thing. But that is like a topic for another time. Anyway, but both acts, regardless of whether or not they killed him, and actually that strengthens my argument. If that is true and he is in denial, that shows that like both of them are trying to eliminate the woman who shaped them. Okay, Snow wouldn't be who he is without Lucy Gray, or he wouldn't be like what he becomes without Lucy Gray. Oh, terrible, terrible situationship. And Nero wouldn't be who he is without Agrippina, his like mommy issues, okay? And they do so through methods that disguise their personal responsibility. They try to like avoid having any like guilt of the matter. And both of these men are capable of extreme cruelty. So it's really interesting that we see this taken here, but they're creating this emotional distance while still having complete control over the matter, right? Nero orchestrates a bunch of schemes. Coriolanus chooses to fire the gun. He knows exactly what he's doing. And if like my theory is true, he is literally like taking every part of control. Specifically over the narrative. So I guess we were kind of getting into it. Let's talk about the differences. Okay. So there's this idea of emotional temperament. We'll go into that first. So Snow, similar to like how Snow is cold, Snow is also kind of cold, right? He's very calculated. He's very restrained from the whole thing. When he like faces off with Katniss in one of the, in Catching Fire, I believe, he has this like strategic long-term thinking. He's like very poised, very elegant, okay? Which is very different from like Nero, who kind of appears in the sources, and maybe they're just trying to put him in a bad light. But his character seems to be something that's like very impulsive, very theatrical. They don't seem like guys who would get along, right? Nero is driven by his passions, whereas Nero is driven by his like evil schemes. So even if they both have ambition, they show it in really different ways. So that I think is the most key difference. And it's interesting that like Snow is associated with like snow and like ice, right? Whereas like Nero is associated with fire, and it's probably because of these like emotionally temperament differences. But I think the most like important thing that underlies our very understanding of like what makes these two men like really evil is their differing levels of control over the narrative, okay? Nero is like known through like these hostile external sources, okay? His legacy is shaped by authors who wrote about him in a bad light, not by himself. We don't like have a like Julius Caesar wrote like his whole like list of like everything that happened to him, and like we had to translate it and it was awful. I mean, it was great, Mr. Abbey. Like Nero, we don't know. We don't know what he was thinking. We really don't. Like, I can't even justify it. And even the stuff that we know is true, like, we have no idea, like, what is going on in this guy's head, if anything is going on at all. Whereas Coriolanus Snow writes his story in first person, okay? He gets the opportunity to have, like, this internal monologue. And we, as the audience, get to watch him fall into, like, this slow path of, like, just becoming crazier and crazier. And you start the book, like, kind of relating to him. You're like, yeah, like, he's talking about, like, some buttons and, like, whatever, like, being hungry or whatever it is, okay? And you, like, feel bad for him, you start to root for him, and you watch him like descend into this madness. And this is something that we don't get to see with Nero, and that's why I'm really like glad, and this is why like it's such a good book, because you're able to like fall into this madness with him, and you realize just how easy it is for anyone to do it. So I guess in conclusion, wrapping up this whole video, I know I've been everywhere, all over, but in conclusion, Nero was an emperor who wanted to be an artist, whereas Snow was a tyrant who believed that his tyranny was an art form, but both of them used this self-perception to justify absolute power and a total disregard for human life.